Hey everyone, welcome back to a special episode of the Strategic Growth Podcast. My name is Kyle Golding. I'm your host. I am joined by Zacharias Voulgaris today. He has a startup that we're going to diagnose a couple of problems and help him out with. This is a business plan triage, and it's one of the first times we're doing it on a new platform, the Riverside platform for the podcast. So we're experimenting a little, but we're going to have a conversation with Zacharias and help him with his business, his startup.
Welcome to the Golding Group Strategic Growth Podcast, featuring expert insights, interviews with thought leaders, and business plan triage. Hosted by Kyle Golding, award-winning entrepreneur, CEO, and chief strategic idealist for the Golding Group.
Zacharias, introduce yourself and tell us about the startup that you're working on, and then we'll get into the conversation about a couple of the big hurdles that you're looking at that we can help you with.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Kyle, for having me in your podcast. I'm Zacharias, or Zach for short, and I come from an engineering background, very tech-oriented. I have done most of my studies around information systems with a focus on applications always. I started my career right after my PhD, working as a researcher first at Georgia Tech. And then I went into the industry as an SEO expert and team leader in that area, and afterwards in data science, where I spent most of my years so far. I also worked in different startups in the past as a CDO or CTO sometimes, filling in this role. And recently I decided to venture into entrepreneurship after attending this program from Antler. And now after the program, I feel that I have enough understanding of what I need to do, and started working on a podcast, on a company of my own, focused on data literacy. Parallel to my career, I have also authored 7 technical books and 1 sci-fi novel.
Okay, so very technical background, very smart, educated, you have experience, you have everything necessary, and now that you have the entrepreneurial spirit because you've gone out on your own. So tell us about the company and the product that you're developing.
The company is still in its very early ages. It doesn't even have a name yet, but it is around data literacy, and we're trying to figure out ways to help other business people and anyone else in the business world, maybe a team leader or whoever has some understanding of business and wants to incorporate data in it, how to become more data literate. And by that, I mean being able to understand data, reason with it, and make decisions based on data, so as to drive a more data-driven culture.
Absolutely essential for business today to not just have a basic understanding of the data that they collect on a regular basis, but really have a command of that data, right? In order to do the most with it, be most effective, efficient, do the best job for their customers, their clients, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because it's easy to understand some things like, okay, well, data is this, and we can make data products with it. Okay, but how? And does all data factor in the same way? And what kind of data products would you prioritize? And okay, how does all this tie in with your business objectives? Because, for example, Bernard Marr has written a whole book about this topic, about data strategy, and has given a wonderful course about how to develop this data strategy ability and incorporate all that in the business. So it's not a very simple thing. Like even if you study this material, understanding how it fits in and passing the exams in that course is not an easy task. So it's even more difficult when you are on your own and you try to figure things out. So data literacy definitely factors in very heavily in anything data related.
Okay, that makes sense. So conversation today is how we can help you take this company from where you are today to the next step, to the next level. So what's your first biggest hurdle that you have in front of you right now? And I'll try to offer as much advice as I can about that problem.
Well, right now we're, as I said, in the very early stage of the whole project. It's just 2 of us, myself and a marketing expert who is in an advisory role. So I'm wondering how is it possible to build a team even though we don't have funding yet? And it's like the chicken and egg problem, isn't it? Because I don't think it's easy to get funding if you don't have some team to show first and a clear business plan. But we do have the business plan and a clear strategy of how to proceed, but we don't have the team yet. So how can we get into that level where we do have a functional team and we're ready to go in front of an investor and say to them, oh, this is who we are and this is what we plan to do?
I think you've off to a good start by having the marketing role filled by someone that's in an advisory role. And advisory roles are a great way to build those early teams where you don't have a lot of funding to just straight up hire people. You need people in place, but they're not necessarily working a 40-hour week and collecting a regular paycheck, right? So advisory roles are great ways to do that. Third-party vendors are also great ways to do that. Having a relationship with a third party, whether, in this case, maybe it's a developer or a team of developers or marketing team or someone for your accounting, bookkeeping, HR, etc. Maybe just having made the contact and deciding who you would work with when you have funding, so that when someone says to you, yes, we like what you're doing, we'll write you a check today, you could the next day start working because you sort of have everyone lined out. But in a third-party situation where you're hiring a firm or a freelancer, they're not on the clock until you need them to be. So I think reaching out and building relationships with those vendors, third-party, and maybe even individuals who'd come in when needed on a freelance basis, et cetera, and having that list of people that you could say, once we receive funding, here's the team we would put together, is a great starting place for you to have those conversations with potential investors or funders. Is we have the team in place, they're sort of waiting for the go. And it also shows a little bit of fiduciary responsibility for you, that you just didn't go out and hire people and making them sitting around collecting a paycheck, doing nothing, waiting for something else to happen before they can do their job. Doing your due diligence, going through the whole interview process of talking to, there's hundreds of people you could hire for this type of role, and what they charge you and what you get from it and how quickly they move, et cetera, and wading through all those details and finding the right fit combination and having that list together, that then you could talk to an investor or someone else about, here is the team I'll put together. And then maybe even if you want to go a little bit further, you could have a list of like the first thing I would replace with a full-time or a part-time employee, bring the first job I bring in-house would be this, and the second job would be this, et cetera, so that you could show how you start with that temporary team, that outside team, and then start replacing them with internal employees as either funding increases or sales start happening, et cetera. I think the main thing to prove there is, number one, vet all of these people so that you can feel confident that if you were to receive funding the next day, you could start moving really fast. And you've done your due diligence and process, and your investor would feel good about that. But also letting anyone who is having this conversation with you about investing in you, or maybe coming on the team as advisor, et cetera, that you have thought these things through and that you really have a plan to move forward, and not just, it'd be cool if we had marketing, it'd be cool if we have that. Maybe I'll hire this guy because I know him. You don't want people to think you're just making it up as you go. So having that list of vendors or freelancers that you're going to use, the reason you chose them, the pricing and the value that you're getting out of it, and then how you would replace them with internal employees if necessary. And maybe you find out that a great example maybe is accounting. Like maybe accounting is the last thing you replace because you can always hire a CPA or a firm to do those things, where you're a technical founder, so maybe you don't need as much tech team because you have that capability, et cetera. Explaining what the economic impact of keeping them in-house or keeping them as freelance, et cetera. Just having that command, having that depth in your business plan about how to get started and how to go to the next level and how to go to the next level, and a really fiduciary responsibility, not, again, just hiring your friends, or it'd be cool to have cool marketing, but only when you need it. That command of the conversation is going to make any investor feel good about what you've done so far.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks for this advice.
So also along the lines of, building a team, especially in a startup situation, is there are a lot of ways to sort of offer people value to be part of the team. There's collecting a paycheck, and certain people need paychecks, and that's fine. They can tell you what they need per hour, and you can, decide to work with them or not. Hiring freelancers or third-party vendors like that, et cetera. But there are some times where, especially kind of small independent shops, boutique agencies, et cetera, they'll do work for spec, or they'll do work for other types of access to something. Maybe even your first customer, maybe early selling to your potential first customer as a partner and less as a client, get some money and get some outside input. Maybe their expertise comes in for them to have early access to your product or service. So there's ways to bring people into and advance your process that isn't necessarily someone writing you a check or you writing a check to someone else. And the great thing about startups is you get to have a little bit of that flexibility. Now, you can't go crazy and give 15 different deals to 15 different people. It'd be really hard to manage ultimately. But one or two key players, especially if there's like this big roadblock right here is holding us back, being really creative to get past that roadblock then makes the rest of, hiring a team out maybe more traditional hiring.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good idea. And I like the idea of partnerships specifically because it seems like this is the way forward for many companies, not just startups, especially if they have this mindset of a win-win situation or, everybody winning through this collaboration instead of, what do you give me in exchange of that? And having this kind of trading mentality. I think there is room for both, but the win-win is definitely great for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's not always, about making the most money as quickly as possible. Typically, it's about building relationships, have partnerships, having people that you can go back to in different situations. Because businesses, starting a business and getting into the market and developing customer 1, 2, and 3, it's different for everyone, and it's usually different than you expect it to be. So having the more people involved and sort of skin in the game, the more people who want to see you be successful, the more potential you have to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
So Zacharias, what do you think is maybe your next big hurdle as you have now some ideas about how to build a team and start building some of those relationships? What do you think comes next after that process?
Because of the nature of the product, or rather service that we're offering, it would require other people to collaborate with us, whether it's through some kind of partnership or through them being vendors, because we cannot offer all those educational services to people. We can only offer so much, and it doesn't scale very well if I have to do all the trainings, right? So at one point, we need to think into getting kind of a group of people who can do different trainings, maybe different specializations in the trainings, and make this whole hub of sorts appealing to other people, because they may know me and they may trust me because I have written books, I have done mini courses, normal courses even, and also have the podcast. So maybe somebody would be happy to train with me, but what about other people who they don't know or they don't know so well? So selling those other people too as part of the same venture might be a hurdle as well.
Extension of the trust factor that could come from you to your team is always a difficult thing to do, especially, as we build our teams out, right? We're going to have those people that are at the founder level and all the way down to, some entry level type of work. And so not everyone in the process is going to be seen at the same expertise level as our founders. This is where typically the conversation comes back to your brand and about the strength of your brand and how you can convey, in this case, the strength of your founder across your brand. And I think you mentioned earlier that you don't have a name yet. You're super early in this process. This gives you actually an opportunity now, as you get into the naming and the branding process of this service, to consider how much of that necessarily needs to be tied back to your specific expertise and reputation in the industry, and how much of it needs to be tied back to maybe the type of service you do or the type of client that you're looking for when it comes to the actual name and branding. If there's an established company, the advice I would give you would be, a strong brand that's really tied to your core values and your guiding principles, et cetera. And then really represented by a founder or by the CEO is the strongest way to go into those conversations. You're not there yet, but it kind of gives you an opportunity to really consider that as you start that naming and branding process. So along with all the things, all the factors you're going to consider in establishing your name and brand, if part of what you think is going to be a hurdle getting into the market and keep establishing and keeping business is people not understanding the depth of the team, but maybe relating more back to you as the founder, really lean into yourself, maybe your name or a name of one of your books or courses or something that's associated with you. Do a Google search and see kind of the terms that are associated with you and your expertise, and see if you can translate that into the naming and the branding and the marketing conversation around the business when it's ready to launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that.
And then I think from there, once you launch it to the world with your name and with the initial brand thrust, more than anything else, I would really focus on giving people, obviously, a lot of your initial branding or marketing is going to be explaining the product or service, like explaining the service. Here's the value of it. Here's what we do with it. Here's what you do with it as the customer. Here's the value you get out of it, all of that. But I think at the same time, you need to be telling people about yourself, because you have a depth of expertise and the team that you've built. And a little bit of that is sort of that standard biographical, like here's the team. But I think you also need to give a little bit more depth to the people that'll eventually be involved with you, so that when people see the members of your team with you, working with you, and they see their faces, they see the real people and not, the mystery team that's behind the curtain, it can kind of help some people understand that you have built a real team of real people, whether they're full-time employees or third-party vendors and all the stuff that we talked about earlier. But the more that people could see on your website and your social media posts, et cetera, that you're working with these people, that you are connected to them, that you are doing things with them, then the trust of them trust of you will transfer to them as well. So it's a little bit of a two-part. But as you develop your branding, think about those factors. As you start your marketing, obviously the thrust is going to be explaining the service and value. That's because you want people to get it. That's why they pay for it. But don't forget to humanize it a little bit with the team members and everyone involved. Also, your partners, maybe some of those initial partners we talked about earlier, their reputation in an industry, their expertise, things that they bring to the table are going to be important for people to understand as well. So make sure that's all in that initial marketing mix. I know that's a big ask. It's a whole lot to put on you at the early stage that you're in, but these are just some things to consider.
Mm-hmm. This is all good advice.
I'm taking notes. He's writing
I'm taking. Yeah, I'm going to have another book published based on these notes.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Zach? Do you think that's a too big of a task, or do you think that's sort of manageable where you are in this stage of the process?
I think it's manageable as long as I can break it down a bit. And the way you have outlined it really helps in that. That's
what I'm here for. I'm here to help you out. This is already an interesting conversation. Data, the value of data. Anyone who's listened to our podcast understands that we highly value data and understanding of data, and then how not just data points on how to sell something, how to make money, but how to understand your customer, understand your client, understand the people that say yes to your product or service. So I'm super excited for you to be providing a service that allows people to continue the depth of understanding of who they're serving and how effectively they're working utilizing data. And I think there's a huge opportunity for you, the potential for this business to take off, because more and more business owners are understanding that power of that data and information moving forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out for you and how all these notes maybe help you on this path, because you're super early and that's always exciting.
Of course. And it's even more exciting when you feel that you have some kind of support and that you are being held accountable. Otherwise, you don't get the same commitment, the same skin in the game as otherwise.
It's true. And unfortunately, I think a mistake sometimes founders make is when they feel like they have something. Obviously, you're putting your time and money in, you feel like it's something that's going to go. But if it's something that's going to be huge, it's going to make a ton of money. The mistake founders make is, I need to own 100% of this. I need to keep complete control of it. And the reality is, as smart as any of us are at what we're experts at, we don't know everything about everything. We need team members, we need partners, we need collaborators. And sometimes that means giving up some control, decision-making, or, bits of your company, percentages of your company. Now, don't give away 50% of it right off the bat, but don't be uptight about giving percentages of your business to people who bring huge value to your business. There's obviously check writers and people who invest money, but like you just said, you're going to need partners, you're going to need collaborators, you're going to need people to work within once you're in the market. So really be open to any kind of deal structure that helps those players who really get you to that next level to actually partner with you.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of this adage that I have heard before, and I always keep in mind that if you want to go somewhere really fast, go by yourself. But if you want to go far, you have to go with other people. You can't go very far on your own.
Yes. If you want to sustain that journey, you got to bring other people with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic advice. I love that quote. I think we're going to end it on that because that's a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation today. Thank you so much, Zach, for coming on the podcast, doing a little bit of business plan triage. I hope that this advice is helpful to you. And when you get a name, when you land on what it's going to be, make sure and send me that information. I'll share that with our listeners. I'll share it on our social media as well. We're looking forward to seeing how this startup gets into the world and benefits the people that you're looking to benefit. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me, Kyle.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Group Strategic Growth Podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Follow the Golden Group on social media. For more information, past episodes, or to contact us, please visit thegoldengroup.com.